Hi, folks. Welcome to the Ginger and Chocolate Podcast. I am your co host, Lindsay, along with Mike, who is not here today. Mike is in Alaska for work and having his own little adventure. So we wish him well. But today I am here with a friend of mine who is one of the most interesting people I know. And she's also a little shy, so probably doesn't necessarily like me saying that, but it's true. My friend Kim Freitas. Hi, Kim. How are you?
Good morning, Lindsay. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Um, so you've done a lot of things that I really admire, some really long distance cycling. And Kim is on my team, guys. So those of you listening know I'm on Team Sheeper, and Kim has been on this team for a long, long time, way before I came onto the team. But what I want to talk about today is that you cycled in Korea. Was it all the way across Korea or just within the country, solo? Not sure. What, did you go all the way across?
North to south and then kind of east to west. So I made a big triangle. Korea
Oh,
is not a very big country. Seoul's in the north, near
okay.
the border with uh, North Korea. And the city of Busan is a port city
Mhm.
uh, in the south. And so I did a route that included that. And then I crossed to the west coast and then cycled back to Seoul. We can talk about how I
Oh,
put that trip together. But
yes, yes, I
I was there for
definitely.
5 weeks
Wow.
last fall, from early September through almost the end of October.
And so, before we talk about the trip and how you put it together and everything, when did you think of this and why? And how did you come to even consider doing a trip like this?
Oh, well, it's a funny answer. Like many people, my introduction to Korean culture was through music and
Mhm.
through K-pop. And I started discovering and watching K-pop artists and groups and started to follow them and just became really interested in, as I watched them and I watched how hard they worked and how much they produced. Most groups like put out an album every year. They tour for 6 months a year. They're incredibly creative. They appear on a lot of shows, and then they do a diverse set of activities, which could include acting and
Oh,
modeling and dancing. I was just astonished by like what culture produces people who can work this hard, this precisely, this cooperatively,
uh-huh.
because some of the groups have been together for a very long time.
Hmm.
And it's not an easy industry to be in. And it's been one of
No.
the most successful ways that Korea has exported their culture.
Huh.
They've done that
Okay.
also through fashion, through dramas and TV and movies, but
Hmm.
largely through music.
Hmm.
And it's really kind of opened up Korea to the rest of the world and made a lot of people interested in the Korean language, in studying in Korea and traveling into Korea. And so for me, it was like a little bit of a gateway into like just a different way of working and approaching your work and approaching teamwork, because most of these groups and bands are groups that live together, travel together, make music together, and as I said, for very intensely and for a long time.
Wow. I didn't know all that. I have one Korean artist I listen to. I'm not sure if I'm saying the name right, but Kokona. And she's amazing and she raps on her she raps in her music, and don't really know what she's saying, but the rapping itself is very melodic and beautiful. And so I listen to her regularly, and my I kind of sing along. I have no idea what I'm saying, and I'm sure not um, uh, pronouncing things right, but it's just fun. You're right; it's very fun music to listen to.
And it's a super wide range of genres, from R&B to rap to pop. Um, yeah, I never knew much about music. I never listened to much music, but it just really drew me in. And then that led to just really wanting to learn more about this amazing country that's had such economic growth. I mean, think about it. The country was occupied by the Japanese from 1910, 15 to 1945. And then largely the countryside was largely destroyed by the Korean War. And then they emerged from that to become something like the 12th largest economy in the world with a tiny population. There's only 55 million people in Korea. So
Wow.
it's a very tiny country that's just worked so hard to make incredible gains economically. And again, it goes back to the industriousness and the hard work and the cooperation that are strong national characteristics of the people.
Wow. That's really interesting, Kim. And I like the idea that you were inspired by the people of this country and the history, and you thought, well, let me ride my bike across it. um, so tell me a little bit about, okay, you started doing you thought of the idea and you set about planning it. So tell me about planning for this, kind of what you did, how long it took, just some details about that, because this seems like a pretty big endeavor, especially when you're going by yourself. You're not going with like a guided tour necessarily or anything like that.
Yeah, so I started out reading about what commercial tours do there. And a lot of them do a classic tour called the Four Rivers that connects four large river systems from the north of the country to the south. And Korea has worked hard to establish designated bike routes. And there's probably 8 or 9 that are pretty well documented and like um, signposted with infrastructure. And these largely follow rivers, and they've been installed from the 2000s onward as part of large hydro projects
Mm.
where they put in dams and do flood control. And then you build big levees that protect the river, the rice fields from the river. And on top of those levees, they build bike paths. And so it's a really natural but intentional form of infrastructure. And so this Four Rivers bike path is covers something like 500 miles, and it's 70% bike protected bike paths,
Wow.
which is really astonishing. And you can you can ride out of the city of Seoul, a city of 25 million, on bike paths, and
Wow.
um, be on safe bike paths that include restrooms, and near the city, restrooms, coffee shops along the way, and there's a lot of recreational facilities for probably 40K either way outside of Seoul.
Wow.
So that was like the starting point, was learning about these bike paths and watching videos on YouTube. There's some really excellent ones, and even some of the YouTubers have put together pretty clear itineraries for
Mm.
how much you could ride each day and what are good places to stop. And it gives you a very good visual of what the countryside is like, what the cycling is like, mm, what you'll encounter along the way. So that was my starting point. So I decided I would start on the Four Rivers as just kind of an easy entry into the world of cycling in Korea. And it turned out to be really good because there was, as I said, a lot of infrastructure, and people were accustomed to seeing bikes, and there was hotels that particularly catered to cyclists. So
Oh.
that was great. The other thing I wanted to do, and I thought I would meet a lot of cyclists along that way too, because my
Mhm.
goal was to try and meet people and talk to them and find out what life was like in
Mhm.
Korea, and how how young people lived, and how the communities were built, and what people aspired to. And so it was really a goal of like, this will be a place where there's a lot of people, and I'll
Mhm.
stop and I'll chat, and I'll see some foreign tourists as well. That didn't all happen, but that
Oh.
was the goal. The other
Uh-huh.
thing I did was I reached out to a group of riders in Korea called the Korean Randonneurs. And Randonneuring is an international group or association of country clubs that do a lot of long distance riding. And I'm a member of both the San Francisco Randonneurs and the Santa Cruz Randonneurs. and I've also ridden with the Davis Randonneurs. And so it's a group that does unsupported long distance rides in a local area, really around the year. So I looked to see if the Korean Randonneurs had any events,
Mm.
and I found one that was a couple weeks into my trip that was between two large cities, Gwangju and Busan, and then returning to Gwangju. I thought, wow, this is a perfect way to meet people, is to do a ride with Koreans and kind of take the format that I was familiar with here in the States
Hmm.
and try and do an event there.
Can
So
you
that
can
became the focus of the ride.
can you just for those who don't know at all the Randonneurs, just give a brief kind of overview of what an event would be like, kind of in general distance and how you guys do that? Because I think it's really interesting how it's done.
So we're super lucky in San Francisco to have the San Francisco Randonneurs that put on, I don't know, 30 events a year, 35 events a year. The distances vary between 200 kilometers and 1,200 kilometers. Everything's in kilometers because the organization was originally French based. And the
Mm-hmm.
goal of many randonneurs is to do a ride that's offered every 4 years in France called Paris-Brest-Paris. And Paris-Brest-Paris requires qualifiers, and
Mm-hmm.
those qualifiers are at the distance of 200, 300, 400, and 600 kilometers. So around the year, those rides with those distances are offered, of course, mostly more 200s than not. And for us in San Francisco, a typical format for a ride would be meet in San Francisco at Crissy Field, and we pay about $8 to do the ride. We pre-register, and we all start together after taking an oath. And the oath is, I promise not to do stupid things. And then we ride across the Golden Gate Bridge and north, and usually ride up into Marin,
Okay.
Tamales, Bodega,
Mm-hmm.
Healdsburg, the different destinations, and then return back through the Marin cities over the bridge and finish.
Mm-hmm.
So the
It's not a
rides are.
race.
It's not a
It's not a
race.
race.
It
Mm-hmm.
is a timed event, and you have to. Your time is recorded, and you
Okay.
do what's called electronic proof of passage. So it means you share your Strava link with the ride
Uh-huh.
organizer, and then the ride is certified.
Okay.
So over the years, I've done a lot of rides, and usually ride with others. You get to know the community. Sometimes you ride on your own. The idea is that they're unsupported or minimally supported,
Mm-hmm.
and again, they're not a race, they're usually endurance rides. So I've really enjoyed those. It gets me on different roads. I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the long distance format. I like the sort of low support
Mm-hmm.
aspect because you end up stopping in towns and using local services. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really rewarding. So the same format is
Mm-hmm.
conducted by randonneur groups around the world. And so I
Okay.
wanted to see if something I love doing here so much was done in the same way in Korea and what
Uh-huh.
long distance riding there was like.
Okay, so you've now got your pieces of you're going to do the four rivers, and then you're going to and then you're going to do the Randonneur. Did the route that you took for the four rivers, did that end? Did that actually bring you to where you were going to meet the Randonneur group?
No, I had to divert off the route, and I did that in a city near Dagu. And so I rode the Four Rivers for probably 5 days and then split off 4 days and then split off. And then I sort of had to start using Ride with GPS to
Mm,
kind of connect over to the city of Gwangju. And I
okay.
wanted to arrive in Gwangju with enough days to kind of organize myself and rest.
Hmm. Hmm.
I was traveling very lightly. I just had a small seat pack
Mm,
and just a few tools, rain gear, a little bit of food, my charging cables, and I had
mm,
sent ahead to Gwangju my lights because I would need them for night riding,
mm,
my
mhm.
reflective gear, a little bit of extra clothes, and some nutrition. So I sent those to a hotel, so that in Gwangju I was ready to go. So
Oh, awesome.
that was then my first experience of sort of navigating open roads and
Uh-huh.
using a tool called Ride with GPS, which is actually quite amazing in terms of helping find good cycling routes. Though sometimes I ended up on little goat paths and on mountain roads that kind of stopped being paved, and I'd have to
Uh-huh.
turn around and try something else. But that gave me some experience of navigating off a bike path
Hmm.
when I wasn't on a bike path, and figuring out sort of the dense network of farm roads and small community roads.
Did that
Uh,
take you about as long as you estimated, or in terms of to get over to Guangzhou?
yeah. So I didn't know how that would go. So each day I would plan out how far I could get, and I would pick a hotel in that town, and then set my course on that. Often I'd arrive late in the day, and so I was
Hmm.
pretty anxious to navigate the cities, which are dense and mostly
Hmm.
high rises,
Uh,
as much as I could do that efficiently and in the daylight. So that was always a, something I learned, is to just kind of keep moving all day, and
mhm.
then kind of know where I was headed, so that I could get through the city to a hotel easily.
Mhm.
So it took me, I guess, 7 days to ride to Gwangju, and
Oh,
then I
okay.
rested for a couple days before starting the Gwangju Busan Gwangju Brevet, which was a 600K event.
Okay. That's pretty good distance. 600K. And so you went, so you did the whole thing with them out. It was an out and back type of
Yeah, it was an
thing.
out and back, and so the time limit for that event was 40 hours.
Okay.
We started at six in the morning, or 7 in the morning,
Mm.
on what turned out to be a very rainy day.
Oh no.
It in fact rained all of that first day, and the turnaround was in Busan, and I had no idea what to expect at all. So. Um, about 40 riders started, and I asked the organizer if they could pair me up with a group that was kind of slow, and that I could navigate and hang on with them, which was
Hmm.
pretty important, as I didn't have great navigational aids. I neglected to download the country maps for my Garmin, so I
Oh.
had the course, but I didn't have the background maps. So I was
Oof.
somewhat handicapped on navigating, a mistake
Hmm.
I hope not to ever make again. So I really depended on the group for
Hmm.
navigation. And so, yeah, that was for me a big challenge. I used my phone a lot to navigate using Ride with GPS, but with the rain, I just really couldn't have my phone out all the time. So I really depended on the group. And
So how many people were
that,
in the group and
mm,
what were they like?
so there was about 5 people in my group, and there
Okay.
was one person who I never learned his name, but I just called him the captain. And he would kind of rally everyone and make sure no one fell behind. And
Mm.
he'd drop back on the hills and kind of wait for me
Oh,
to
nice.
summit, and then he'd kind of tell the group when they were stopping for coffee, and it was quite fun. And I felt a bit overextended, but I was really motivated, and I can tell that they were trying to keep me with them. So I rode with that group of 5 or 6 for, I don't know, 100 a good while. But I did have a mechanical, actually, pretty early on in the
Oh no.
event. I stopped being able to shift,
Oh
which
wow.
was like pretty major, because the terrain is rolling, and you just need
Uh-huh.
to shift up and down to get over
Oh,
these little risers. And I
that.
changed out my batteries, thinking that
Mhm.
was it, but it wasn't.
Oh,
Something else is going on. So the guy said to me, "Just keep riding, don't stop, just keep riding." And so I'd try and get a running start on a hill, and try and get up, and I'd kind of weave back and forth to get
mhm.
up the little hills. And they said, "Just keep riding, keep riding, keep riding." So
Wow.
we stopped at a control point. There's controls about every 50K where you have to check in at like a bus stop and get a stamp, or you take a photo in a designated place. And this is your
Mm-hmm.
proof of passage. And so when we got there, everybody at the first checkpoint, everybody looked at the bike and no one could figure out why it wasn't shifting. And so they said, don't worry, just keep riding, keep riding. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I think my ride's over, guys. I just can't shift.
Yeah.
So they said, just keep riding. We called a mechanic and they're going to meet us at this town.
Oh.
So it's like, okay. And we kept going, and they stopped at a little market, and there was a young guy there with a toolbox, and he came over to me and said, I'll look at your bike.
Huh.
And he looked at it and couldn't shift it. And he said, I don't know what to do here. You'll have to come to my shop. So he loaded me and my bike in his car, and we went to a shop that was about 5 miles away. And he put it on the stand, and he said, I think the derailleur's broken. I
Oh.
said, like, oh, shoot. And he said, I don't have this kind of derailleur. It's just, I don't carry this kind of bike, and I just don't have this. So, um, yeah, I don't think I can do anything. So I thought, well, I guess I'm just riding back to Gwangju slowly,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. But he said, wait a minute, my bike's in the back of the shop, and I have SRAM on my bike. I'll just give you my derailleur.
Oh my
And so
God.
he takes the derailleur off his own personal bike and he puts it on my bike. And
Wow.
then he makes some adjustments to the brakes, which was another problem I had. And then he returns me to the course, which is like
Wow.
astonishing. Um, and then when I got there, the shop owner said, oh, all your friends left, but they said, just try and catch them. I'm never going to catch them. But there was another guy leaving, and he said, ride with me. So we started riding. He got a flat. We changed it together, and then we kept riding. And he says, we're turning off here. And it just looked like a little farmhouse. And it turns out it was like a little country kitchen. And the whole group was in there having this massive lunch. And they said,
Ah.
oh, we knew you were coming, so we ordered lunch for you. And there's like this big bowl of seaweed soup with tofu and rice and all these side dishes, which is very characteristic of Korean meals. And
Wow.
so they'd ordered food for me. And so we got back on the road, and it was still raining, but like now I was well fed and my bike was working. So we ended up all staying together on and off all the way to Busan, where we rode into a big city. Busan's a city of 6 million,
Mm.
on a big, big highway that would have been super scary to ride on by myself. But being in the group with a bunch of rear lights flashing,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was raining and at night, was pretty amazing. And I felt, safe with them. And I didn't have as many anxieties as I think I would have had under
Mm-hmm.
those conditions if I'd been on my own. I don't even know if I could have done it on my own,
Mm-hmm.
but the group just really mm, enveloped me and took care of me, and um, yeah, just made sure that I was with them, and that I generally was hanging in there. So that was an incredibly positive experience.
What amazing people. I mean,
Yeah,
that's kind of unheard of. Like,
yeah,
here's
I've never
my
been cared
personal.
for in a ride like that. And when we got to Busan, they said, "Oh, where are you staying?" And I said, "Well, I didn't book anything because I didn't know if you guys were stopping or if you were going to ride through the night, keep riding through the night." And they got on their phones and they said, "Oh, we booked you a hotel, and we'll meet you here in the morning at 5 o'clock for breakfast." So we
Wow.
got a couple of hours sleep, and in the
Mm-hmm.
morning I met them. We had another big meal, and then we started back.
Wow.
So the group split up a little bit, but I ended up riding all the way in with one person, and
Mm-hmm.
he just kept me on his wheel. And we rode hours and hours and hours together, hardly ever talking.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't speak that much English or didn't share that much with me, but he took it upon himself to make sure I finished that ride, which we finished in 39 hours and 45 minutes. So
Woo!
15 minutes to spare,
Perfect.
arriving into Gwangju at night, after night, around 9:45 at night.
Well, that's pretty
Um,
amazing considering you were almost out of the ride altogether, you
I
know?
was
And
almost out of the ride altogether. But I guess the highlight of it was just experiencing the dynamics of group riding in Korea, which I think was very unique. And
Mhm.
again, I think was reflective of the teamwork I saw in some of the K-pop bands that I love so much, of how people really cooperate and put the team first
Mhm. Mhm.
and are just very, very aware of the situation of another person
Uh-huh.
and want the group overall to be successful.
Yeah. That's that's really amazing. You make me want to go to Korea, and I've never even considered that as being a place I would want to go. So, um, you're a good ambassador for Americans to go check it out. Um, okay, so when you were done with the ride, um, was that the end of your ride, or did you continue on?
So I hibernated in a hotel room for 2 days and just
Uh-huh.
watched movies. I was really tired. And my goal was then to ride back to Seoul and to do it on some different routes and to get to know another part of the country.
Mm,
Many Randonneur organizations have what they call permanents. These are courses that have been designated at certain distances and are part of a archive or library
mm,
of rides that are sort of approved or have been done in the past that you can do on your own.
mm,
So if you aren't able to do an event, but you still want to cover that distance, you can do a permanent. So I'd looked on the Korean Randonneur website and found that they had an amazing collection of permanents and very well organized by region on a map. So you could
mm,
click on the route and get the whole ride with GPS. So I downloaded a bunch of those before I left home. And essentially, then what I did is string together a bunch of permanents to kind of head to the southern coast, go around an island called Jindu, come up the west coast, and explore that coastline by stringing together these permanents. And the beautiful part of them was that I always knew I was on bike legal roads because these
mm,
are roads that they had ridden, and they were often, some of the most beautiful roads in the area, or took in like interesting geography, went through nice towns.
mhm,
Uh, this southwest part of Korea is more agriculture and somewhat
mhm,
less developed than many other parts of the country. Still prosperous, but a really good place to ride. And so I was able to use these routes to then put together another 7 days or 8 days of riding, covering about 700 miles and returning to Seoul.
okay.
Um, so that was kind of the three pieces of my cycling: is riding to the start of the brevet, doing the brevet with the Korean randonneurs, and then riding home on a different route, which kind of exposed me to different parts of the country. And by then I'd gotten a little more confident
Yeah.
about riding, about finding services, about finding hotels, about where I could get food, and and I felt just very excited each day to kind of map out my course and
Mhm,
decide where I was going to stay, and just kind of like see what was up the road, like
mhm,
try
mhm,
to yeah, just see what I could connect and explore. During that time, I was now mostly off of any designated cycle paths,
mhm,
and I saw almost no other cyclist.
mm,
It's cycle touring isn't quite as big as it is here.
okay.
There's a lot of recreational riders, and then there's this really committed core of very experienced, very competent long distance riders.
Mhm,
But touring isn't really that popular yet.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, um, I was thinking, I've done some rides you've put together and they're amazing. I was thinking Kim should lead some people over there, some of us that like to ride with you. One question I had is about communication. How did you find it communicating? Did you always able to find someone who spoke enough English to kind of get you through if you had questions, or how did that work?
So around Seoul, English is pretty easy to use. Almost all young people now study English, and their English is probably quite a bit better um, than they would imagine, or we would imagine. Though they are often hesitant to speak. In the countryside, I would go days without speaking or finding an English speaking person.
Hmm.
And so I would use Google Translate
Hmm.
when I would try to check into a hotel or if I was asking directions. I did
Okay.
learn the Hangul, which is the Korean alphabet, because I
Okay.
felt like I really wanted to be able to sound out place names and to correlate the map with the
Mm.
signage. Often that wasn't a problem because they did have the Romanized version of a place name.
Oh, okay.
But Google Maps doesn't work very well in Korea, especially outside of Seoul. So I would use other mapping software, some of which had English and some of which didn't. So it
Oh,
was
okay.
actually very helpful to know at least the Korean alphabet and to be able to phonetically sound out place names. The language is beautifully designed and it's perfectly phonetic. So, and
Oh,
it's fairly easy to learn that alphabet and the sounds. And I
okay.
did that with Duolingo. It took me a long time, but I'm sure someone could learn Korean more quickly than I did. And I learned a few greetings and you know how to say thank you and
Mhm.
nice to meet you and things like that. But I never acquired any language to my disappointment. Yeah, Google Translate was amazing. Sometimes when I would check into a hotel, it'd be an older person, and they would call their son or daughter who lived in Seoul, and they would talk to me on the phone about what I needed or wanted or what I was doing.
Oh, that's
So that was
cool.
always quite interesting.
How cool. So, okay. So you did the whole tour around. What would you say was your favorite day of cycling and why?
Yeah, I think my favorite day of cycling was cycling around a small island called Jindu. And there's a much more famous island called Jeju, which is a vacation island, very beautiful, much bigger and more well known. This is Jindu is in the southwest part of the country, and there's a lot of offshore islands. And I don't know what the distance all around the island is, maybe 120 miles or something like
Mhm.
that. And so I rode over some bridges to the island and stayed in a city on one of the edges, and then kind of rode around the island in one day. And it was like some of it was it's kind of like being on Big Sur, where you're kind of up above the ocean, and then you kind of swoop down to a creek and a harbor, and then you climb up again. Um,
Mhm.
and it's an island where there's a lot of fishing and shellfish cultivation, where um, they have a lot of aquaculture, where they either raise seafood in beds that are in harbors or actually in big tanks on the shore, big concrete structures that kind of look like greenhouses, but they pump a lot of seawater in and then pump it out. So it's actually very, very hard work, all of it.
Mhm.
And so you got to really see like how the nation feeds itself and how developed they are in just every sector. So it's an agricultural island as well as this fishing island. So I really enjoyed seeing these working ports and seeing the farmland and being in places where people mostly are raising food. And that's really the great thing about cycling is you go through small towns and you see like the cabinet maker and the welding shop and the auto body repair shop and you see the salvage yard and you see the like little vegetable market that's set up on Wednesdays. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect of just riding through Korean daily life that wasn't as polished and ultra modern as Seoul and that amazing city. So it's one of the real happinesses of riding is trying to kind of decode what you're seeing, like what a school looks like and what the life of children is like there, and what are sports like for young kids, and what do older people do during the day. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I really, really enjoyed trying to trying to figure things out from what I would see and the little bit I knew about Korea.
That's very cool. That sounds so amazing. And what was okay? So that was your favorite day. I don't know anything about the country, so I don't know what the weather's like, what the terrain's like. Is it more tropical? Is it mountainous? Is it dry? Or did you see like a variety of terrains as you were riding around?
Um, it's a I would say it's a hilly country. There are mountains, but I wasn't riding in an area where there were big mountains. Probably like I would do 400 and 500 foot climbs many times a day, but it's mostly rolling and connecting river valleys. The weather is that they get very big extremes. The winters are very cold and very bitter. Winds come down from Russia, and so
Oh.
the winters are very cold and severe. The summers are very hot and humid, and I experienced really hot weather the first week and a half I was there, like
Mm.
95% heat and humidity. I mean, it was
Oh,
just really, really hot. I mean, the good thing about cycling is you kind of create your own little microclimate because you're
yeah.
moving. So every time I'd stop, I'd be just so hot. And you have to drink a lot. So it was really, really hot and stressful, very fatiguing that first week. I'm not
Mhm.
accustomed to that kind of heat. And then that storm that we had on the brevet kind of broke the weather. And after that, it was incredible. Like it went from 90 to 80 to 70 very
Oh.
quickly. And the weather was absolutely ideal. So the times to travel in Korea are spring and fall,
Okay.
kind of April, May,
Mhm.
and September, October into November. And
Okay.
those are stunningly beautiful. I saw a lot of rice harvesting. The rice
Mm.
fields are kind of yellowish and very picturesque. They're harvesting fruit. It's a very intensively farmed area,
Mhm.
and so the countryside's really, really beautiful.
That's awesome. Well, I love all of the descriptions that you've given us of your ride and the country and the people. And I think it's really amazing that you were able to do this. I'm so happy for you that were able to have this experience. Is there anything before we go, anything else that you would like to share with people? Maybe you are inspiring people to try something like this, either in Korea or someone else. So, or somewhere else. So, yeah, any last things that you'd like to share?
I just really believe that our health and our fitness are like such amazing assets, and
Mhm.
they allow us to do things that are simple but really special, and to go places and see things and meet people and do that in a very human powered, slow, thoughtful way.
Mhm.
And I think cycling has really given me that. When you're on a bike, you're really exposed. And as you could see from my experience on the brevet, where I was so much the weak link in this group, you feel often very vulnerable, and you feel you just have to depend on others and
Mm-hmm.
your the mindset that we've developed as athletes
Mm-hmm.
to um, find happiness. And um, yeah, it's such a great way to travel because you absolutely have to go slowly,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, you end up in small places, and you unpredictable things happen. And
Yeah.
even though I sort of generally planned or had some ideas about what I wanted to do, and that was enough of a framework,
Mm-hmm.
each day is just different. And the flow of the day, it takes on its own life.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoy that. And I feel so happy that I've had these experiences through cycling, and that
Mm-hmm.
cycling has been a platform that has given me the chance to really be free.
Yeah. Very nice. I agree. I'm not a fast rider, but I do get to enjoy the countryside while I'm riding, and that's something that I always feel so grateful when I'm on a bike, just that I'm out there enjoying the view. I'm I feel like all my senses are being used, while I'm out there because I'm listening for cars and things, but I'm also smelling, the trees and whatever I'm going through. It could be making food, it could be anything, smelling and seeing and definitely feeling things, pedaling. Um, and I think I agree. That's the best way to see things. I've not had the experience in a car, for example, that I have had on a bike. Um, Even if I've enjoyed driving through some place, I often think, "Oh, I wish I could ride here to get a little bit better view." Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking to me about this. It's very, like I've said early on, you inspire me, and I appreciate all that you do for the team, and just as an ambassador for the sport of cycling in particular. Um, I think it's important that people who enjoy cycling get out there and tell others, because it's such an amazing thing and it can change someone's life. So I really appreciate that. And with that said, listeners, I'm going to ask that you rate, review, and share our show with someone else. It helps us, and it helps get this little podcast out to people who might enjoy it and might enjoy hearing stories like Kim's. And if you don't know where to go to do that, you can go to any platform that you listen to podcasts on. You can also go to our website, which is gingerandchocolate.com. And yeah, we'll see you there.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks.
Bye.